Hello, Zalto Live listeners. Before we get started, we wanted to let you know that more teachings from Zen monk Claude Anshin Thomas are available in his two books, At Hell's Gate, A Soldier's Journey from War to Peace, and Bringing Meditation to Life, 108 Teachings on the Path of Zen Practice. Both are available wherever books are sold, and all proceeds go to the Zalto Foundation, dedicated to promoting nonviolence, awareness, and positive change.
Hello and welcome to Zalto Live, the podcast featuring Zen Buddhist monk Claude Anshin Thomas, who will share with you his life experiences that includes not only military combat, personal violence, and addiction, but also healing, transformation, and the ongoing joy of everyday life. Please enjoy listening.
Nice to be here. First, I'll begin by thanking Miriam and Doris for the invitation to make it possible that we could meet. Have I met any of you before? Two people. Okay. Oh, good. Nice to meet you again. What predominantly brings me here is the German language version of the newest book, Bringing Meditation to Life. I've had the privilege to have two books published. The first book, At Hell's Gate, has been translated some years ago into German. Now, the proceeds of these books, they do not come to me. I am a mendicant monk by vow, which means I am not permitted to work gainfully. I'm not permitted to own anything. I have no insurance. I have no retirement. I live quite directly. It's a very conscious choice on my part. Now, because most of you we haven't met before, I will introduce myself to you. I'm sure Doris has done a very thorough job. She did take us on a tour of the center part of the city. Bensheim is stunning. Yes. For someone born and raised in the United States, to imagine that the roots of this community started in 600, that's just I can't take, it's overwhelming for me. It's so incredibly impressive. At a certain point, I will read a couple of sections out of this book, and actually, Genrai will read them. You can understand her better than me, probably. But first, a bit about me. I am a fully ordained Zen Buddhist monk. I am, however, not here to sell you Buddhism or convince you of anything. It's simply the path that makes the most sense for me. Because it does not matter what I think, believe, or say. It simply matters what I do. As I mentioned, I was born and raised in the United States. Doris was saying that Bensheim is a rather small place. Only 46,000 or something. 42,000. The village that I was raised in was 900. If you counted the dogs and cats and chickens. So I grew up in a very small rural farming community in the state of Pennsylvania. My father was a school teacher and also had been a soldier in the Second War at a time when my father and your fathers were enemies. Even when I say it, I almost can cry. My father and the majority of men in the community where I grew up served in the Second War. My father encouraged me to go into the military. So while I was still in high school, I joined the military. I was 17 years old. I went through my formal training, and then I was sent here to Germany for some advanced training. I spent time around a couple of cities, but most of my time was spent in the countryside. The few cities that I was able to touch was Neu-Ulm, and then there were two areas, Grafenwöhr and Hohensfeld. They are large training areas. As I was completing my training here, I volunteered to go to war in Vietnam. Now, I tell you this because it has been incredibly important for me to understand that within me exist all past generations. Within me exists my mother, my father, and all of their families, endlessly through space and time. So the decisions that I thought I was making, I was actually not making. Those decisions had been already made for me. My existence is shaped by all of that information that's passed to me, not only through those family generations, but through the society and culture of which I'm a part. In Buddhist practice, we refer to this as the karma that we inherited. Now, I grew up with the idea or the belief that there was a plan for me, and that my job was simply to fulfill that plan, that it was unchangeable. I was locked into it. I didn't know what it was, but it was fixed. And then I came in contact with Buddhist practice and the whole reality of inherited karma. My father was a soldier in the Second War. My grandfather, a soldier in the First War. My great-grandfather was a soldier in the war with Spain, and other family members in the American Civil War. Most of the men in my community had served in the military and fought in war. I didn't stand a chance. It was decided for me, and I didn't know it. If I want my life to be different, I need to be willing to live differently. Now, the interesting thing about karma is that it can be changed. I am not fatalistically locked into a specific way of living. So, there is the karma that I inherit, and then there's the karma that I create. If I want my world to be different, I need to be willing to live differently. I can't think myself into that new way of living. I have to live myself into a new way of thinking. I have been, I served in Vietnam for a bit more than a year. I was a helicopter crew chief. Yeah, I was responsible for caring for the machinery. But I was also a machine gunner. In ignorance, I was responsible for the deaths of untold numbers of people. And I live with that every day. If I want my world to be different, then it's really necessary for me to become conscious, to wake up to how I have been conditioned. I was injured very seriously in the war. I spent a long time in military hospital. When they discharged me from the hospital, they also discharged me from the military. However, they had been giving me narcotic medications for pain. So when they discharged me, I had two addictions, narcotics and violence. Oh, they do not mix well. You see, war, the real truth of war, it doesn't end. The consequences of war doesn't end. Not only in those of us who have participated, but in the successive generations. However, the karma that I inherit leads to the karma that I create. If I'm willing to wake up to the reality of the karma that I have inherited and then created, I can change that. I can live differently. However, I must give up all of my ideas about what that means. Yes. Most of the men in the community where I grew up, they never talked about the war. What they did do is they spent a lot of time drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, working really hard, and dying very young. My father was 53 years old. He died a month and a half after his 53rd birthday. I never imagined to live past 25. So in this endless succession of wars, the real cost of war begins to manifest itself. It manifests itself in those who have served and then in their successive generations. So as a Buddhist monk, I'm not permitted to marry. Yeah, we had this conversation today at a bakery in Ginheim. Yeah. The the baker asked if we were allowed to get married. We said no. He went, oh, yeah, no. So, however, I have not always been a monk. I do have a son. Okay, so my son is 51 years old. He's getting old, my son. I don't quite understand that. My son has never been in the military. He does wear a uniform. He's not in the police, or he's not a fire worker. He's not how do you call the people in the ambulance, the EMTs? Yes, I know, but in German. The English I know. Okay. He's a commercial airline pilot. See? As I heal for successive generations. So, my son didn't grow up with me. One of the real costs of war. He grew up with his mother because it just wasn't possible for me. After the war, I was not able to work in any kind of useful way. I particularly didn't do well with authority. No. Police. People in authority. No, I didn't do well with them because I didn't trust them. They did not have my best interest at heart. Oh, I heard a phone. Oh, I forgot to say, if you do have one of these, make sure it's turned off, because if there's another one that rings, I'm a mendicant monk. That's how I keep in phones. I do public talks. People forget to turn off their phone. I got this one about a month ago. Yeah. That's not entirely true. But please make sure your phones are turned off. Also, I wanted to say that if the translator, if Genrai is searching for a word, please let her search. Don't everyone start translating for her, because then it'll get quite chaotic. If Genrai can't find a word, she'll ask Doris. And if Doris doesn't have the word, we're out of luck. So once I was discharged from the hospital, I was addicted. Alcohol and other drugs. It was the life my father lived. It was the influences in my life. I lived homeless. I lived on the street. So being a mendicant monk is not all that difficult for me. I know what it's like to live on. I know what it's like to not have. But there was I reached a point, I think it was in the sort of early 1980s. I didn't see the point of living anymore. Life did not make any sense to me. I just didn't see the point. I didn't really want to die, but I just didn't know how to live with the darkness that seemed to permeate my life. Now, in the United States, today, 22 former soldiers have killed themselves because life just doesn't make any sense for them anymore. I understand that. So I'm committed to do whatever I can to support them in understanding that while the suffering never ends, we can learn how to live in peace with our unpeacefulness. We don't have to hide from it. We don't have to ignore it. We can learn to live at peace with our unpeacefulness if we want. There are, however, some necessary steps. At least there were for me. First step, I needed to stop taking intoxicants, and I needed to stay stopped. No alcohol, no illegal drugs, and no prescribed drugs. I had to stop and stay stopped. Once I closed that umbrella, the suffering that was mine and that I had inherited had a chance to show itself. I could become more conscious of it. In the early stages, psychological help was supportive to me, but it wasn't enough. At a point, it wasn't enough. I needed something else. A social worker recommended to me that I go to a Buddhist meditation retreat being facilitated by a monk who had done some work with former soldiers. This was in 1990. If I'm truthful with you, I thought this social worker was crazy. Really? A meditation retreat? I didn't know anything about meditation. And in truth, most people don't either. You see, meditation cannot be taught. What can be taught are essential forms and structures. Meditation and daily life are not two things, and meditation is experiential. I'll show you. What's the most important thing in your life? Quick. Calm.
Huh?
Yeah, calm. Yeah. What's the most important thing in your life? Quick. No, don't look to her. Come on. Something.
Community.
Community. Good. What is the most important thing in your life? Yeah. Experience. Okay. I'm going to do a demonstration. I want you to imagine as best as possible that you're in my skin. Best as possible. All right, Genra, you're on. Make sure you give them back, though. I can't see. You dog. So the moment that I pulled her hand away from my mouth, what was the most important thing in my life? Tell me, what was the most important thing in my life when I...
Luft zu bekommen.
One breath. One breath. Very foundation of life is one breath followed by one breath. Doesn't matter what we think. Doesn't matter what we believe. Doesn't matter what we say. Matters what we do. Now, I'm ordained in a Zen lineage. So in the monastery, I've studied in two. Once we've achieved what we imagine to be some insight, we're invited to bring that to the community, just to check our insight. So if there's anyone out there that does not believe that breath is the very foundation of life, come sit in a chair. Seriously, come sit in a chair. I'll cover your nose and mouth, and we'll check your idea. See, we want to think and believe whatever we want. We actually shape the world that we exist in with our thoughts. To wake up to this process, there's nothing more important. Because if we want the world to be different, and we need to be willing to live differently. So what are you willing to do, and how can I help? See, that's why I wear these clothes. I didn't dress up for you. Doris can testify. When I arrived, I'm wearing robes. When I became ordained, this is the clothes they gave me. They took my hair, my hair back then, because hair keeps growing. They took my hair and gave me these clothes. These clothes are a symbol of my commitment to be of service to Buddha. See, I can see people's minds going, oh, it's worshiping. Buddha is not the person's name. Look to the person to your left. Look to the person to your right. You see, you're looking at Buddha. Buddha is simply a word which means awake or enlightened. We don't worship a deity or an entity. The icons that you see in monasteries, they only represent for us what's possible for us to achieve. My commitment is to be of service to all of you, to support you in whatever way I can to wake up. I want the world to be different. Oh, it's not about changing what's out here. This was something that I heard at that first retreat that I went to, that within me exists the entire universe. If I want the world to be different, I need to live differently. I need to wake up to the roots of war, violence, and suffering in me, in thought, speech, and action, in all of its manifestations, and stop. Just stop. Doesn't matter what I do, matters what I don't do. Yeah. So when you see the person on the street that's begging, you see the person on the street that's speaking a language different from you, a different color from you, different customs and cultures than you. Watch how your mind works. That's a reflection of conditioning. My responsibility is to see where we are connected, not where we are different. When I came here as a young soldier, I didn't see German people. I didn't see Germans as people. I was conditioned to see you as somehow, to not see your humanity as somehow inferior. This is how I was conditioned. So I stand in front of you and I say to all of you, each and every one, for all of the harm that I have ever caused you in thought, speech, or action, I apologize to you. And I make a commitment to never do those things again. Yes, for all of the harm that I have ever caused you in thought, speech, or action, I apologize to you. And I make a commitment to never do those things again. For all of the harm that I have ever caused you in thought, speech, or action, I apologize to you. And I make a commitment to never do those things again. I'm going to read something randomly out of the book. Now, the book. This is a really good book. I've been told that. Yes. And here's another piece. I didn't actually write this book, but every word in there is mine. See, the editor from the first book sits on the board of the Zalto Foundation, which is a non-profit organization that has grown around my activities in the world. She said, you need to write another book. And I said, I'm too busy to write another book. There's too much stuff to do. She said, why don't we send out an invitation to people? Except they've been to a talk or a retreat with you, and you've said something that's been meaningful to them. Have them send it in. Let's make a book out of those. I said, well, that wasn't my idea. You see, I've been working with combat veterans for decades. Part of the meditation practice I do with them is writing, because often we can give voice through writing that we can't through talking. But when they write, I also write. And so I had this compilation of things. I wanted those published. She said, nah, we'll do this. I said, okay. So let me share one with you. Study the self. I often speak about the 4 essentials of Zen practice: silence, discipline, ritual, and study. When I mention study, most people immediately think about which books they need to read. They have an academic or intellectual association with the word study. I understand that, but the sense of study that has been conveyed to me is not limited to an intellectual pursuit. Study includes the intellect. However, study also includes the attention we pay to our thoughts, the attention we pay to our feelings, and the attention we pay to our perceptions as we move through our day. Zen practice is about being willing to study ourselves, to wake up to the causes and conditions that keep us trapped in cycles of suffering. So I've talked really enough to you. Now I want to open it up to questions. Now you can ask me any question you want. This is the most interesting part of the evening for me. However, when you ask a question, make sure you ask a question, don't make a statement. Direct to the point. You ask, I respond. I don't have any answers. So this is such a really nice city. I'm feeling generous. When you ask your question, 12 words or less. Yeah. Questions. If you need a couple more, I'll give you a couple more.
Haben Sie heute Kontakt zu Ihrem Sohn und pflegen den?
Yes, I do.
Ja.
Yeah. Yes. I travel extensively. I never stopped traveling, even through COVID. I did care for the restrictions. Public meetings were, for a period of time, not possible. We did have some outside. My son lives about 3,000 kilometers from where I live. So we don't have so much actual contact. But when we do, it's good. I also have 2 grandchildren. Yes. A granddaughter, 2.5, and a grandson, 7 months. I haven't met him yet, but this is the gift of the internet. We have met on Zoom. I look forward to meeting in person. Question?
How important would you see it on this path of enlightenment to have a community and a teacher or a master?
Critical. So, as I've said, meditation and daily life are not 2 things. But the root of an active meditation practice, and from my orientation, is sitting. To really just sit in stillness, connecting with the breath, actually discovering how challenging that is, how wild the mind is. But when we sit, we bring more silence into our lives. It is really possible to get into serious psychic difficulties. So it's not something that ought to be approached without support, but support by people experienced in an established lineage or tradition. It's critical. Question? About anything? Yeah.
Can we discover our current conditioning, and how do we do that?
The first response is yes, we can, if we want. The second, I don't know that there is one way. It really is, I mean, I have to want to. But as I mentioned earlier, we can't think ourselves into that. We have to live ourselves into that. And I do believe there are some necessary steps important to that. What I would suggest, or what I would pass on to you is what was passed on to me. In 1983, April 19th, 1983, I took a massive amount of barbiturates because I just didn't know how to live anymore. I survived that. And I was disappointed. Today, I'd like to make it to 800. Well, actually 801, because I think it was one of these biblical guys that lived to be 800. So I'd like to make 801. I still like a challenge. But yes, so for me it was to stop taking the toxicants, to stay stopped, to stop supporting institutions of killing. So it meant to not eat meat, fish, or poultry, to have a sustained, committed, disciplined sitting practice supported by a community of like-minded people and an authentic teacher, and the willingness to live differently, abandoning ideas about what that meant. So yes, it is possible, and those are the steps that I'm taking. Question? Yep.
I calm my mind when I sit there.
Well, don't try to calm your mind. Appreciate it and all of its activity. Yes, it can be quite interesting when we can become the observer. I mean, if I have an idea about what a calm mind, what a calm mind should be like, I'm guaranteed not to get that. And my mind will only get more and more busy. I will be more and more frustrated. Now, when I sit, and I don't know when this happened. I've now become the observer of my thoughts, my feelings. I am not my thoughts. I am not my feelings. But I'm not other than my thoughts and feelings. And sometimes I find my mind quite interesting sometimes. Some of the ideas it comes up with, I have no idea where they came from. It can be quite interesting. Did you have a question?
About other beliefs.
Yeah, I don't think about them too much, but I'm not closed to them, regardless of what someone believes. The point is to see where we are connected, not where we are different. If we focus only on our differences, therein lies the roots of war. So where are we connected? And as it was said to me, and I also say it out loud, I am not here to convert people to Buddhism. There are already too many Buddhists. What we need is more Buddhas, more people awakened. And that can happen regardless of one's tradition. It is that point where the tradition is no longer my identity. If it's my identity, then anything that's different from that, it challenges me. So I want to destroy it or get rid of it, or I want to run it down to build myself up. Doris.
When you became a Buddhist, how did your point of view concerning death and dying change?
I never did think much about death and dying, not in any sort of substantial way. As a soldier, I could have died at any moment. So I just never thought about it. Living a life of active drug addiction, I could have died at any point. In fact, for a period of time in my life, I really believed that those who died in the war, they were the lucky ones, because they didn't have to live with the real cost of what we'd done. Today, as I have accumulated more years on this planet, by numbers I have less in front than behind. And so the reality of all of this changing becomes more present. All things that come into existence will pass away. So until I'm actually face to face, I just don't think about it too much. And when I'm gifted with the opportunity to support people who are in that process, it is an opportunity for me to be present for them, to allow them to teach me how to be present for them, because each experience and situation is different. Yes, I have no idea when the end will come. I've faced it already several times, and when it comes on quick, not much time to think about it. But then as it comes on more slowly, I have to think about it a bit more. It's like, I like a cup of tea in the morning. When I die, that's gone, man. Maybe. I know I 6 years back, I had an embolism in both lungs, and I was dying. And in the moment of dying, the first thought that I had was, geez, disappointed. I got more things to do here. The next thought I had was, will I get to see what's next, if anything? So that's just sort of ready for the transition. In that moment, next moment, who knows? Question?
It's good to go an inner path instead to try to better or change the world. My question is then, how does the world get better then?
When we get better, the world gets better. Imagine this, drop of water on a stone. A drop of water falling on that stone, moment after moment, day after day, year after year. It burrows a hole in that stone. That stone at one point will break. I want to be that drop of water. So I want to be the piece that I want to see in the world without a preconceived idea about what that piece is supposed to look like. So this practice of self-reflection, waking up to my conditioning, being willing to live in a different relationship with that, this is the path for me. I believe it would be the path for all. But I'm not here to sell that, just to live that. Last question. Yes?
Are you happy?
Oh, I don't think about it. See, yes? This chasing after happiness is suffering, because I'm attempting to get the world conform to some idea. I have an opportunity. Being born in this form, I have an opportunity. There is a recitation I do every evening. Let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time passes swiftly by, and opportunity is lost. Each of us must strive to awaken. Awaken. Take heed. Do not squander this life. I have a unique opportunity. I don't want to waste a minute. You had a question? Okay. Now, I'm going to bring this to a close in a way which has become traditional for me when I'm in public. First, to thank Doris and Miriam and all of the people responsible for providing us the opportunity to meet. I place my hands in this position. The Japanese name of this position is Gasho. And I bow to you in gratitude. Bowing is also a very disciplined meditation practice. To Genrai, for all of the support that she has provided to me and to the communities here in Europe, and her brilliant translation. Yeah. I bow to her in gratitude. And to all of you, Buddhas to be, I bow to you in gratitude. Now, this bowing, this was also taught to us. It is a pathway to awakening. We're taught to press our palms together, thumb tips touching, resting the thumb tips on the knuckles, Tip of the longest finger parallel with the tip of the nose. We're not too stiff or too casual. Precise.
Aber präzise.
And when we bow only at the waist and nothing else moves. In Gasho. Not dramatic. Precise. It's not an act of subjugation. It's very interesting what arises through the process of bowing. Really to bow with my full intention. And I tell you, it was so hard for me to bow. I had so much resistance to that place where my suffering was fully manifesting itself within all of the ideas of suffering, all of the ideas of bowing, until one day I just surrendered. I placed my hands in Gasho, stepped into the meditation hall right foot first, bowed, and I burst into tears. Flood of emotions. Freedom. It was an incredible experience for me. And there was no one there. No, just me. Because I didn't want anyone to see me bow. It would have ruined my image. Tough guy. I did it in secret. Then, not now.
Thank you for listening to this episode on Zalto Live. If you would like additional information, please look at the show notes or visit zalto.org. That's ZALTHO.org. Our work is made possible solely through donations, so please consider making a tax-deductible gift on our website. We wish you well and thank you.